Ellie Martin was just 16 when she disappeared without a trace, and Jamal Harris had already lost too many friends to the shadows of Thornhill Estate. Their lives, once separate, became tangled in a web of violence, secrets, and betrayal that would expose the darkest truths hidden behind Britain's most dangerous estate. Thornhill Estate is a place that many in Britain know only through grim headlines and fleeting news reports. Located on the outskirts of a once thriving city, it was originally built with hopes of creating a close-knit community, a place where families could find affordable homes and a fresh start. But over the years, Thornhill transformed into something very different. Instead of safety and opportunity, it became a place where fear and violence seemed to take root in the very bricks and mortar. Walking through Thornhill's streets today, it's hard to ignore the signs of hardship. Graffiti stains the walls, litters the alleyways, and the once bright playgrounds lie broken and forgotten. For many residents, life is a constant struggle, finding work, avoiding trouble, and keeping their loved ones safe. Many families have lived there for generations, clinging to memories of better days, while others have been forced to move in after being priced out of more stable neighborhoods. The estate's reputation as Britain's most dangerous was not earned overnight. Small acts of crime, shoplifting, vandalism, and minor fights slowly grew into something far more serious. As unemployment rose and resources dried up, some young people on the estate turned to gangs for protection and a sense of belonging. What started as small groups defending their territory quickly evolved into ruthless crews battling for control of the streets. Fear became the currency of everyday life. Many residents speak of hearing gunshots in the night or waking to the sound of shouting and sirens. Parents warn their children not to stray too far, and neighbors often keep their doors locked even during the day. Trust is hard to come by when danger hides in every shadow. People who once felt proud of their home now avoid talking about Thornhill outside its borders, embarrassed by what their community has become. But Thornhill is more than just a place of crime and fear. It is a complex world, where stories of pain and resilience exist side by side. There are people who refuse to give in, who fight to protect their families and rebuild their neighborhood. Community centers run programs to keep kids off the streets. Local shops try to stay open despite threats, and a few brave voices speak out against the violence. This documentary begins by taking you inside Thornhill Estate, not just to show the crime headlines but to explore the lives behind them. It reveals how Thornhill's problems are not isolated incidents, but part of a bigger, more troubling picture. The danger here is real, but it is also a symptom of something deeper: poverty, neglect, and broken promises. To understand Thornhill, we must look beyond the surface and uncover the hidden stories that make this estate one of Britain's most dangerous places. As the story unfolds, we will meet the people caught in the middle, the victims and the perpetrators, and see how their lives are connected in ways no one expected. Thornhill is not just a place, it is a world where every shadow tells a story, and every life matters. The rise of the Shadow Crew is one of the darkest chapters in Thornhill's history. This gang did not appear out of nowhere. They grew from the frustrations and fears of a community struggling to survive. What began as a small group of teenagers looking for protection soon became a powerful force that ruled the estate with an iron fist. The Shadow Crew's influence stretched across every corner of Thornhill, shaping the lives of everyone who lived there. At first, the gang was made up of young people who felt ignored and forgotten by the outside world. Many had dropped out of school or never found steady jobs. They lived in cramped homes with limited opportunities and little hope for the future. The Shadow Crew offered them a sense of belonging and purpose. It was a way to fight back against the hardships that surrounded them. But what started as a tight-knit group soon turned dangerous. The gang's rise was marked by a series of violent clashes with rival groups. Territorial disputes often ended in brutal fights, shootings, and even deaths. The streets of Thornhill became a battleground, where loyalty was tested and fear ruled. The Shadow Crew's reputation for ruthlessness spread quickly, keeping other gangs at bay and forcing residents to choose sides or stay silent. Their presence was impossible to ignore, and many believed they controlled every illegal activity on the estate, from drug dealing to theft. Despite their power, the gang stayed hidden in many ways. They operated in the shadows, using secret signals and coded messages to communicate. They avoided attracting too much attention from the police, knowing that too many arrests could weaken their hold. This careful balance allowed them to grow stronger while keeping the law at arm's length. It also made it difficult for outsiders to understand just how deep their control was. But the Shadow Crew was more than just a gang. It became a symbol of Thornhill's broken promises. The estate's neglect by the authorities and lack of support for young people created the perfect conditions for the gang to thrive. Many believed that if jobs, education, and community programs had been available, the Shadow Crew might never have gained such power. Instead, frustration and anger boiled over into violence. As the gang tightened its grip, it became clear that Thornhill's problems were not just about crime. The Shadow Crew's rise was a warning sign of a community pushed to the edge. They were both the cause and the result of a system that had failed the people living there. To understand Thornhill's danger, we must look closely at how this gang grew from desperation and fear, turning a once hopeful estate into a place ruled by shadows. Over the course of 3 years, Thornhill Estate was rocked by a series of mysterious deaths that left the community shaken and the police baffled. 5 young people, each with different backgrounds and no obvious connections, either vanished without a trace or were found lifeless under strange circumstances. These cases, seemingly random at first, began to paint a dark and chilling picture of the estate's hidden dangers. The first victim was a young man known for staying out of trouble, someone who didn't belong to any gang or criminal group. His body was discovered in a deserted part of Thornhill, with no clear signs pointing to who had harmed him or why. The police treated the case as an isolated incident, but residents whispered that it was only the beginning of something worse. Over the following months, more young people disappeared or were found dead, each death colder and more confusing than the last. What made these murders especially haunting was the lack of any clear motive. Unlike typical gang violence where disputes over territory or revenge might explain the killings, these victims didn't fit the usual patterns. Some had no known enemies, while others were simply trying to escape the cycle of crime by focusing on school or work. This unpredictability caused fear to spread through Thornhill in a new and more unsettling way. If danger could strike anyone, no one was truly safe. Police investigations struggled to find solid leads. Forensic evidence was limited, and witnesses were either too scared to speak or unwilling to get involved. The tight silence that had long protected the estate's criminal elements now also shielded the truth behind these deaths. Rumors and conspiracy theories filled the void left by official silence. Some believed a hidden killer was targeting young people at random. Others suspected that someone inside the community was orchestrating the violence for reasons no one understood. Families were left desperate for answers, but received little comfort from the authorities. The grief of losing a child to such unexplained violence tore through the community, increasing mistrust and hopelessness. Some residents felt that the police had given up, while others feared that the real threats were being ignored or covered up. This growing tension made Thornhill feel even more like a place where fear had no end. These unsolved murders were more than just tragic events. They were symptoms of a deeper, more dangerous reality. They revealed how Thornhill was trapped in a cycle of violence that no one seemed able to break. Each death left a scar on the estate's spirit, a reminder that beneath the surface something sinister was at work. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that uncovering the truth would require looking beyond the obvious and confronting the shadows lurking in Thornhill's darkest corners. Ellie Martin's disappearance sent shockwaves through Thornhill Estate like no other event before. Ellie was not involved in gangs or the estate's underworld. She was a bright, quiet teenager, known for her love of books and dreams of leaving Thornhill behind for a better life. When she vanished one cold autumn evening, it shattered the fragile hope that had been growing in the community. Her case was different. It was personal to everyone who knew her, and deeply troubling to those who didn't. Ellie's last known whereabouts were near the estate's old playground, a place that had long been abandoned and avoided by many residents. The playground was said to be haunted by the memory of past violence, a place where whispers of gang fights and tragedies lingered in the cold air. Despite its reputation, Ellie often walked through this area on her way home from school. That night, she never made it back. The search for Ellie was immediate, but fraught with difficulties. Police combed through the estate and nearby woods, neighbors volunteered to help, and posters of her face appeared on every street corner. But days turned into weeks with no sign of her. The mystery deepened, and fear grew. Many believed she had fallen victim to the same unseen forces that had claimed other young lives on Thornhill, but without the gang connections, her disappearance raised even more questions. As investigators dug deeper, strange details began to surface. Ellie had been seen talking to several people in the days leading up to her disappearance. Some friends, some strangers. These encounters led the police to uncover a network of secrets hidden beneath the surface of Thornhill. Ellie's life intersected with parts of the estate's darker world that no one had expected. Her innocence was not a shield but a doorway to understanding something much larger. The estate itself seemed to close in around those searching for answers. The old playground, with its broken swings and rusted slides, became a symbol of the lost childhoods in Thornhill. It was more than a location. It was a reminder of how the past and present violence continued to haunt the community. The playground, once a place of joy, was now a chilling landmark in Ellie's disappearance. Her case forced residents and authorities alike to face uncomfortable truths. Thornhill was not just a place where crime happened, it was a place where people disappeared, where the vulnerable were caught in a web of silence and danger. Ellie Martin's story became a turning point, revealing how deep the estate's shadows ran and how much remained hidden beneath the surface. Her disappearance was a call to look closer, to question what was real, and to confront the darkness living inside Britain's most dangerous estate. The police force assigned to Thornhill Estate faced challenges unlike any other in Britain. They were caught in a difficult position, expected to restore order in a place where trust between law enforcement and the community was nearly non-existent. Over the years, this tension had grown so deep that many residents saw the police not as protectors, but as outsiders or worse, as part of the problem. The officers working Thornhill had to navigate a landscape filled with hostility and fear. Many residents were reluctant to speak openly, afraid that sharing information could bring dangerous consequences. Witnesses disappeared, stories changed, and tips led nowhere. This culture of silence made it nearly impossible for the police to gather evidence or make meaningful arrests. Without cooperation, even the best detectives were left frustrated and powerless. Adding to the difficulties were rumors and allegations of corruption within the force itself. Some officers were accused of turning a blind eye to certain gang activities, either out of fear, loyalty, or personal gain. These claims further eroded trust and fueled anger among Thornhill's residents. The belief that parts of the police might be compromised only deepened the divide between those sworn to uphold the law and those trying to live under it. The strain on the police was also practical. The department assigned to Thornhill was understaffed and underfunded, with limited resources to handle the complex problems facing the estate. Long hours, dangerous situations, and little public support weighed heavily on officers. Some became cynical, while others left the force entirely, unwilling or unable to face the daily pressures. This turnover created gaps in experience and continuity, making progress even more difficult. Despite these obstacles, there were officers who tried to make a difference. They worked tirelessly to build relationships with community members, to listen and understand rather than just enforce. They supported local initiatives and attempted to break down the barriers of weighed heavily on officers. Some became cynical, while others left the force entirely, unwilling or unable to face the daily pressures. This turnover created gaps in experience and continuity, making progress even more difficult. Despite these obstacles, there were officers who tried to make a difference. They worked tirelessly to build relationships with community members, to listen and understand rather than just enforce. They supported local initiatives and attempted to break down the barriers of mistrust, but their efforts often felt like small flickers of light struggling against a growing darkness. The complicated relationship between Thornhill's residents and police reveals much about the estate's wider struggles. It shows how crime and violence do not exist in isolation, but are part of a system shaped by fear, neglect, and broken bonds. The police force's challenges were a mirror of the community's own fractured state. This chapter in Thornhill's story uncovers the deep divisions and struggles that keep the estate trapped in a cycle of danger. Without trust, cooperation, and support, law enforcement cannot succeed. The police are not the enemy, but they are also not the heroes the community needs, caught instead in a system that has failed them all. In the middle of Thornhill Estate's ongoing turmoil, an unexpected figure stepped forward, a former member of the Shadow Crew who chose to speak out against the very gang they once belonged to. This person's decision to become a whistleblower shocked many, offering a rare glimpse into the secret world behind Thornhill's violence. Their information promised to change everything the police and residents thought they knew about the gang and the estate itself. This ex-gang member had lived inside the Shadow Crew's dangerous circle, witnessing firsthand the cruelty and control the gang exerted. They described how the gang operated, not just as a group of criminals, but as a tightly organized force that manipulated the estate's residents through fear and loyalty. Their stories revealed details about drug trafficking, secret meetings, and violent punishments that had remained hidden for years. The whistleblower provided crucial information about the gang's involvement in the unsolved murders and disappearances that had plagued Thornhill. They named names and locations, pointing to a web of crimes that stretched far beyond what the police had uncovered. This inside knowledge led to new investigations, raids, and arrests, giving hope that the cycle of violence could finally be broken. Yet despite the valuable insights, questions about the whistleblower's true motives remained. Some wondered if this was a genuine act of remorse, a desire to protect the community and stop the bloodshed. Others suspected a darker agenda, perhaps a personal vendetta or a bid for power within the gang's shifting hierarchy. Trust was hard to come by in Thornhill, and even this unexpected Ellie was met with suspicion. The whistleblower's revelations also exposed the complex relationships within the estate. It became clear that gang members were not just enemies but often connected by family ties, childhood friendships, or shared histories. This tangled web blurred the lines between victims and perpetrators, showing how Thornhill's struggles were deeply personal for many. Their decision to speak out put them in immediate danger. Threats followed, and their safety became a pressing concern for police and community leaders. Protecting this individual became a priority, highlighting the risks faced by anyone who dared to challenge the Shadow Crew's power. This chapter uncovers the fragile hope brought by one person's courage to break silence. The whistleblower's story changed the course of the investigation and offered a new way to understand Thornhill's dark reality. But it also reminded everyone that in a place ruled by fear and loyalty, even the truth can be a dangerous thing to reveal. As the investigation into Thornhill Estate's violence deepened, something unexpected began to emerge. Hidden connections between the victims and the perpetrators. At first, these links were subtle, easily overlooked amid the chaos and fear, but as detectives pieced together information from interviews, social media, and school records, a complex web of relationships appeared, challenging the idea that the crimes were random or purely gang-related. Many of the young people involved, whether as victims or suspects, had known each other since childhood. They had grown up in the same streets, attended the same schools, and sometimes even shared family ties. Some were cousins, neighbors, or old friends who had drifted apart as the estate's violence escalated. Others had fallen out over personal disputes or misunderstandings that spiraled into tragedy. These connections showed that Thornhill was not a simple battleground of gangs and criminals, but a tightly knit community where loyalty and betrayal were deeply intertwined. The discovery of these links raised difficult questions. How could people who once cared for each other end up on opposite sides of such brutal conflicts? How did friendships turn into rivalries that fueled shootings and disappearances? The investigation revealed stories of jealousy, revenge, and desperation, feelings that ran as deep as the estate's cracks in its broken buildings. For some residents, these revelations were painful but not surprising. Thornhill's close quarters and limited opportunities often meant that people's lives were intertwined in ways outsiders might not understand. When violence broke out, it didn't just tear apart strangers, it tore apart families and friendships. This complicated the idea of good and bad in Thornhill. Many of those involved were both victims and perpetrators in different ways, caught in cycles they struggled to escape. The connections also extended beyond Thornhill itself. Some victims and gang members had links to other estates and communities, showing that the violence was part of a wider network. Detectives realized that solving Thornhill's mysteries would require more than just arrests and raids. It meant understanding the human stories behind the violence, the hopes, fears, and broken relationships that shaped people's choices. These hidden connections forced everyone involved to rethink the nature of the conflict and consider the community as a whole, rather than just isolated criminals. One night the police launched a bold operation that shook Thornhill Estate to its core. They raided a known Shadow Crew hideout, expecting to find weapons, drugs, and evidence to weaken the gang's control. What they uncovered instead went far beyond what anyone had imagined. The raid revealed a hidden network that tied the gang to powerful figures outside the estate, local officials, business owners, and even some residents who had been trusted members of the community. This event changed the investigation dramatically. Suddenly, the focus was not only on gang violence, but on uncovering who else was involved in the corruption and how deep it went. The raid led to arrests of several influential individuals, shaking up the local power structure and forcing some to face justice for the first time. But it also created new dangers. Those with something to lose fought back, threatening witnesses and trying to silence anyone who dared to speak out. The raid exposed the challenge of fighting crime in a place where the lines between criminals and protectors were blurred. It showed how Thornhill's struggles were tied to larger issues of power, money, and control. The gang was not just a criminal group but part of a wider network that benefited from the estate's suffering. As the dust settled, Thornhill faced a turning point. The raid revealed how much work remained to be done to break the cycle of violence and corruption. It also reminded everyone that change would not come easily, because the true battle was not just on the streets, but inside the hearts and minds of a community fighting to reclaim its future. In the aftermath of the raid and the shocking revelations it brought, Thornhill Estate entered a period of uneasy calm. The arrests and exposure of corruption had sent ripples through the community, but the true battle was far from over. What no one anticipated was the unexpected alliance that began to form among the residents, a fragile but growing movement determined to reclaim their home from the grip of fear and violence. This new wave of hope did not come from outside forces or government programs, but from within Thornhill itself. Ordinary people, parents, teachers, shopkeepers, and young adults started to speak up, refusing to accept the status quo any longer. They organized meetings, cleaned up the streets, and supported each other through the darkest days. This grassroots effort showed that beneath the estate's battered exterior, a resilient spirit still lived. Community centers became safe havens where children could learn and play without fear, and adults could find resources to rebuild their lives. Local volunteers set up workshops focused on job training, conflict resolution, and mental health support. These small but vital steps began to chip away at the despair that had long defined Thornhill. Yet, the road to recovery was filled with challenges. Old rivalries and mistrust did not vanish overnight. Some residents doubted whether change was possible, haunted by years of broken promises and failed attempts. The Shadow Crew, though weakened, still cast a long shadow, and pockets of violence flared up sporadically, threatening to undo the progress made. Police presence increased, but this time with a focus on building relationships rather than just enforcing rules. Officers worked alongside community leaders, trying to rebuild trust and ensure safety. Slowly, some residents began to see law enforcement not as enemies, but as partners in healing. The estate's story began to reach beyond its borders. Journalists, social workers and activists took notice of Thornhill's transformation efforts, bringing attention and resources to support the fragile progress. This external interest provided a much-needed boost, but it also raised fears of exploitation, or short-lived attention that might disappear once the cameras left. Despite these concerns, Thornhill's people remained committed to change. Their fight was no longer just about survival but about reclaiming dignity and hope. The estate's most dangerous days seemed behind them, but the scars remained, a reminder of the hard lessons learned and the work still to come. This chapter reveals the power of community in the face of despair. Thornhill's story is no longer just one of crime and violence, but of resilience and determination. It shows that even in Britain's most dangerous estate, hope can take root, and from that hope, a better future can grow. As the story of Thornhill Estate unfolded, the final reveal challenged everything that had been believed about the nature of danger within its borders. For years, the community and outsiders alike saw the estate as a battlefield, where gangs and violence were the clear enemy. But the deeper investigation uncovered a more complicated truth, one that blurred the lines between victim and perpetrator, friend and foe, and forced a painful reckoning with what the real enemy truly was. Throughout the investigation, it became clear that Thornhill's problems were not caused by a single group or person, but by a system that failed the community at every level. Poverty, neglect, and broken social structures had created an environment where fear could flourish. The estate itself, once designed to provide homes and hope, became a place where people were trapped by circumstance, by history, and by choices made both inside and outside its borders. This realization shifted the narrative from blaming individuals to understanding the larger forces at play. The Shadow Crew, though responsible for much violence, was also a symptom of Thornhill's deeper issues. Many gang members were young people who had few alternatives, driven by desperation and the need to protect themselves in a hostile world. Victims were often caught in the same cycle, their lives shaped by a community stretched thin and overlooked. The final reveal showed how the true enemy was not just the gangs or the violence, but the invisible barriers that kept Thornhill trapped in its dangerous cycle. These barriers included poverty, lack of education, insufficient support services, and systemic neglect. They created conditions where fear and violence were almost inevitable, and where hope struggled to survive. This insight reframed the community's struggle, not as a simple fight against crime, but as a battle to break free from a system designed to hold them back. It highlighted the need for change on many levels, from government policy to social attitudes, and the importance of investing in places like Thornhill before the damage becomes too great. The estate's story became a call to action, reminding viewers that behind the headlines and statistics are real people with dreams, fears, and a desire for something better. It challenged everyone to look beyond stereotypes and to recognize that true safety and justice require understanding and addressing the root causes of crime. In the end, Thornhill's story is one of complexity and contradiction, a place where danger hides in every shadow, but also where courage and hope quietly persist. It asks us to reconsider who the real enemy is, and whether we are willing to confront the difficult truths needed to bring lasting change. This final chapter leaves viewers questioning what justice truly means, and how communities like Thornhill